record on this computer. Okay. So let's go, we're gonna go and so we're not reinventing things. We're gonna slide this down over here. So we're gonna call this home 2, menu 2. So we're not doing a sticky nav. We actually would prefer to have a hamburger style menu. So we're gonna go over to our mobile screens. We're gonna go, these things are so massive. We're gonna go over here and I'm gonna go ahead and grab this. You're welcome to create a new one. Again, I think I mentioned that, you know, like doing something fun and interesting is always cool, but we just want to make sure we're sticking to industry standards so we're not confusing anyone. There are maybe a couple variations of this, like I said in that anatomy lecture that we did. There's a few different variations of this. Ever so slight modification to this one would be that all 3 lines are the same length. So we can decide, oh my gosh, where we want to place this. So again, we want to make sure that we're sticking within our grid. If we have things too far up into this corner, a lot of your users are going to have a really tough time actually hitting and selecting that. So make sure that you're sticking within your grid and you're not hinging too far up onto your screen. So let's give that a select, and then let's change that color so it's much darker. So maybe at this stage of the game, maybe we're gonna, we'll get to your question in one brief moment, Jocelyn. We're gonna make that, maybe we want that home screen logo to be much bigger. Maybe a little bit more like that onboarding screen. And then we're gonna have our order now. We're gonna have a beautiful food hero shop. Jocelyn, shoot. What would you like? What's your question?
So I don't think this is the most important thing, but in XD, do you know, because you know how like iPhones have like the battery and the time up in like the top corners and then the middle part's cut out? Does XD go up to the top where the time is, or does it stop below where like that cutout is?
So that's a good question. So this screen is literally just what is actually in fact available on the screen from like a broad kind of sense. So depending on your developer, they will probably add a little bit more when they're doing their actual programming of this image. That image will be able to be set to extend a little bit more because someone might have an older iPhone and that picture, you'll have a bar at the top, right? Is that what you mean? Like the new iPhones actually has the phone cut out and stuff and the screen goes up to the very, very top?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that'll just come in the development stage of things. When you're doing it like this, it doesn't now mean that, let's just try to pull this up. Yeah, your net menu nav is not going to now be way up into that top corner. That'll happen when it's in development. But good question, good thought.
All right, thank you.
We don't need to move this all the way down. Actually delete this menu screen. Maybe I'll just shimmy it off. So this is kind of say it in a very simplistic form. So now we need to build an actual navigation. So there are several ways that we can have a navigation open up. We can have our nav open up to be this whole screen. It can be half a screen or maybe 2/3 of a screen. It could be a little portion. It's 1000% up to you how big you want that to be. So let's just call this nav. Because it's a small-ish menu, I don't want it to take up the whole screen. It's just my own personal preference. So I'm going to just begin to set this up. So I would like my nav to open up to be about that size. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of Let's just use this text box to steal this text. So we're going to call this. So we're going to say home. Menu. Account, or maybe profile. And cart. So now I can kind of gauge, where I want this to actually be, or, the spacing. What do I think? Do I want this to be left aligned, etc.? So we can decide now how we want that to be. We could potentially go over to, pardon me, with the sniffles. Where's our social? I had some social elements on here. Slide in. Here we go. I could also grab them from our icon searcher as well. But I want to just make this super duper easy. Oh, sometimes in XD, these will cause you a little bit of grief. Grabbing some of your pictures. So perhaps maybe we want to make sure that those are maybe in our menus or in our navigation. And then we can just kind of decide how much space. We don't want these too close together because if we've got big giant hands, we want to make sure that those people are able to click them. Okay, so I'm fairly happy with the spacing between those. They're not too close together. Again, just as those big fingers could be, we don't want to add our menu items too close because we only have a few. We have lots of availability to make them much larger. So let's now maybe just add a few, oh my goodness, lines here. And my favorite part of XD is that you can actually, just going to delete these so it doesn't get too distracting. Actually, where's my numbers there? Gauge that. So now I will group those suckers together. And that's looking pretty good, but we don't want this, all this white space when we are programming this. So I'm just going to click on that top portion, select that. I'm just going to hinge that in. And that's our navigation. And then same thing, just make sure that when we are doing our additional screens, we want to make sure that that navigation does not jump around. That is my biggest pet peeve when I'm running through your things, is what that navigation jumps around the logo. Oh, yep.
I had a question. So for when we do the menu, basically however many we have to make, we make them on one and just keep making it bigger, the canvas bigger then? Like, do we have to have all of them on one?
All of what on one?
I mean, all of like the menu, like the starter, the main, and
it's up to you. You can do it all on one like this, or we can instead, actually, let's completely ditch this. We can now we could do something like this as well. Is our last one? Extras. Whoops. Grab everything, center it up. Make sure that these suckers are centered. I should have locked this layer up so we're not constantly fiddling with it. And you could do your menu that way as well. Okay. Any questions? Is that quite clear? Yeah, Jocelyn.
If you were to do like a menu that like scrolls to the side, kind of like in groups, if that makes sense, like how would you show that?
I'm not sure what you mean.
Like, I'm trying to think of an example, but it's kind of like the onboarding screen with like the dots at the bottom. Like there's multiple pages and you like swipe to the left or right to the next one. If you were to do something like that, how would you
Gotcha.
show
You would essentially probably in this stage of things just show them in so we call them different states. So you would show essentially screen 1 and then you would duplicate it and that would be screen 2 if you do want to have a side swipe. Also just note if you are doing a side swipe, you always want to make sure that it's very, very clear to your users that that would be a side swipe. So you always want to have a little bit of like a peekaboo happening. Maybe we've got, again, this isn't really ideal for how I'm doing this right now, but just to show you. Minus 9, little 32. So something like that, and maybe some arrows somewhere to show you. Is that what you mean, Jocelyn?